Not today, Satan, you imaginary scapegoat. This is the Almost Daily ZenCast. Hello, and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Hello and namaste, friends. And I beg forgiveness to anyone listening who might find this episode offensive. My intention is not to offend, but to share my thoughts and opinions about what I see going on in the world. And before we really get into it, let's kick things off with a little bit of music and contemplate the simple and absurd reality that not that long ago, music was considered a tool of the devil. That's right, friends. As remarkable as it may seem, not that long ago, music was considered evil. Art was considered evil. Dancing was considered evil. Ironically, music and dancing are two of humanity's oldest cultural institutions. Did that make you want to get up and wiggle? Or is Satan trying to seduce you? Thank you, DJ Zed. DJ Zed, my imaginary sidekick and literary fictional animatronic digital loop asset discotheque synthetica entertainment mogul from another dimension. That was his classic track, Remembering the Forgotten Funk. A remix live, improvised digital loop performance using the G House Volume 2 audio asset pack. Thank you so much. Okay, friends, let's blame Satan for everything. Okay, all right, I get it. Trust me. As a former enthusiastic card-carrying Bible thumper, blind faith believer in the dogma, I understand the seductive nature of buying into the ideological construct of a comic book cartoon character that is evil incarnate. I get it. It's really seductive. But here's why it's really seductive. And this is the problem, in my humble opinion. By creating, and I do believe it is a creation of mankind, and we'll talk about that in a second, but by creating a personified incarnation of evil, two things become really easy. The total abdication of personal responsibility, aka, quote unquote, the devil made me do it. And two, or B, or whatever, whichever I started with numbers or letters. And the second thing that becomes really easy to do is to hyper-vilify, dehumanize, and objectify whoever you accuse of being in league with the devil. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I believe the devil is a made-up ideological construct. Why do I believe this? Why do I, after years of observation, why have I come to this conclusion? And mind you, I'm not an atheist, although atheists don't really see me as a fellow atheist. I think most atheists see me as like a hippie new age woo nut job. I don't consider myself an atheist. I also do not consider myself a member of any organized religion. I have spent most of my intellectual life, from as young as I can remember, questioning ideology, right? Comparing and contrasting what the authority figure from the organized religion tells me versus what I observe in the real world with as few filter of biases as I can, as few bias filters as I can, as I can manage. And that's the challenge, right? When you accept indoctrination, when you accept a dogma, when you accept articles of faith, those become filters. Those become bias-confirming filters in our minds. Here's why I have come to the conclusion that Satan is a tool of man and not the other way around. Although plenty of people have faith in this idea that there is a personified being that represents pure good and a personified being that represents pure evil, there is no independent, verifiable evidence for that. Anytime I ask for evidence of this, what I get is evidence of the existence of human greed. Evidence for the corruption of the human ego. But as of yet, I've not found satisfactory evidence for the existence of a personified figure, right? You know what there is? Mountains and mountains, an overwhelming amount of independently verifiable evidence for. And this is the shocker, right? Now, before I talk about that, let me just clarify a few things. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm not an atheist. I believe in and have come to the intellectual conclusion beyond belief, based on evidence and experience and, to me, undebunkable phenomena that I've witnessed, that there is a divinity, and that divinity is dualistic. There is a light side and a dark side. And these things, these powers, let us call them, these entities, well, entities is kind of a very misleading, very personification word. These energies, let us call them that, they are an intrinsic part of life, right? Take away humanity and look at nature without people in it. Is there evil? Is there a Satan in the world? Or is there just life and death and the struggle between those two polar extremes? I would argue, and of course I could be wrong, let me just say, friends, I've said this before in the show and I'll say it again. I understand. I recognize and acknowledge that I could be categorically wrong about everything. Right? But, well, I acknowledge that, right? And I've always sort of tried to maintain that notion, that idea in my head. I could be totally wrong about this. So I always question and question and question and question. And after a lifetime of questioning and trying to review history without bias and trying to review history with the understanding of all the caveats of human corruption, of the fact that the winners write the history, etc., what I see is an undeniable pattern throughout human history of kings, politicians, religious leaders, priests, using this idea of a personified, evil incarnate, a being that physically can be interacted with, that can be blamed for everything that's gone wrong, and that can be used to prove guilt by association. This pattern throughout history has always, invariably, explicitly been used to rationalize and excuse antagonistic and increasingly violent behavior towards those who have been dehumanized. I mean, even someone who's never paid attention to history can spend an afternoon and do a quick survey and be like, oh, smack. Yeah, since long before Christianity was even invented, before the Bible was written down, before the person we call Jesus may or may not have existed, because there's a whole murky area about when or if he ever really existed in the way that it is described in the Bible, but that's a different issue, right? Long before we even got to that, the establishment of those ideas, people have been saying, hey, we don't like that group over there, and we strongly believe that they are in league with the evil incarnate, so we must destroy them. It's 2023, folks. And the ultimate irony of this is that, specifically, I can only really specifically speak to it from the perspective of here in American culture, right? Although I suspect strongly that similar ideas and similar phenomena are going on around the world. But one of the craziest things about American culture is that apparently, based on my observations of claims and statements and directives and commentary issued, apparently freedom, according to conservative American Christians, freedom means being able to do only that which conservative American Christian ideology deems appropriate. Now, that doesn't sound like freedom to me at all. That sounds like religious dictatorship. I would argue, dear friends, that the very idea that we are caught up in a spiritual war of good versus evil is manipulation. I think the struggle we're really in is some sort of resurgence of theocratic autocracy versus everybody else. And the primary, one of the primary tools being used in this ideological struggle is the hyper-vilification, dehumanization, objectification, and accusation of. Now, mind you, there is some reality to the notion. There really is a Church of Satan, whoop-de-doo. But, under the banner of true freedom, are we not supposed to allow people to choose to worship that, even though we don't like it? Because that's what freedom is. As long as they're not hurting others, right? As long as they're not damaging the common good, as it were, I suppose. Although that phrase has been run through the mud. My concern here is that it is working, right? There is a wedge of American society large enough to create an impact, large enough to foment conflict. There's a segment of American society that is clinging to this, right? And is eating up every scrap and morsel of red meat about how they are all Satan worshipers and all kinds of psychotic evil things. Now, mind you, people do horrible, evil things. And those people must be held accountable, obviously. I'm in no way, shape, or form defending the very real problems in the world, right? I think one of my nuanced points that gets glossed over a lot by people who are just, geared up to argue against anything I say, that are just scanning for keywords, is that it seems really clear to me, and I realize I could be wrong, but it seems really clear to me that there is no human endeavor. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There are no human endeavors in this world that are monoliths of pure evil or monoliths of pure good. Have you met humanity? As an individual member, I can assure you, I am no saint. I've had my flaws. I've made my mistakes. I've made horrible choices. And these are things I must reconcile, deal with, beg forgiveness for, right? I've also done my best to be a good person. Failed, succeeded, something in between. There are some exceptional people that are truly amazing and truly have very little to beg forgiveness for, right? But there is no one so righteous that they need not work on themselves. And there is and I know that there are some horrible people out there, and this is a controversial idea, but I think there is no one so broken and so corrupt that they cannot, without personal effort and work and change and self-analysis, heal themselves and be healed. I could be wrong. Obviously, there have been some monstrous individuals throughout human history that have done absolutely horrific things. And, it's really hard. It's really hard to look at those things and be like, well, we need to forgive this person, right? But, if we're going to focus in on what's going on, which is a theocratic discussion between, people who claim to believe in the teachings of Christ and everybody else, my big question is, okay, why isn't the vast plurality of American Christianity acting more like Christ? As Mahatma Gandhi pointed out, however long ago, in this really interesting quote, he said to some interviewer, "I like your Christ. I just don't like your Christians. They are not very Christ-like," or something to that effect. Okay. The greatest irony, in my opinion, of any Christian sect accusing anybody else of being in league with Satan is that if you look at Christian history, Christianity has conducted some of the most egregious crimes against humanity in history, right? Sure, plenty of evil people have done evil things that weren't Christians, but let's be real, yo. Hitler believed in Jesus. He thought what he was doing was Christ's good work. Or at least he claimed to. As much as it may aggravate people who want to cling to the biblical comic book character, I must stand up and say, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you stopped to think about how by vilifying a group over there and rationalizing and creating permission structures to act in violent ways against them, are you not stooping to that level of evil that they are supposedly at? There's a deep chasm of argumentation there, right? Because there's really bizarrely mixed messaging in the text of the Bible as they're known in postmodern times. But as you may recall from previous episodes, I've got some things to say about the text and the condition it's currently in. That's a pin on the corkboard. Go check out one of the recent episodes. I can't remember what it's called. Do I have it? Can I find it real quick? Is it limited edition Grift? No. Was it programming notes? It might have been the most recent programming notes, which is something I use when I'm not sure what to call the title of something. But go check it out. And of course, I've made plenty of episodes about my opinion on the problematic issues with the postmodern derivative texts of the Bible, especially when compared to the original language of the text, right? I mean, one of the first things I throw down in a discussion with a Bible thumper is, well, but have you read it in its original Aramaic? Or at least a really good, clear, direct to your native language translation of the original Aramaic. Anyone who has knows that the original texts and what we know today post King James, there's a huge difference. And it's really important that we understand what's going on there, okay? But independent of that, because like I said, since long before there was even the beginnings of the oral traditions of the stories that became the written things in the Bible, kings, priests, politicians, tribal leaders, shamans, all kinds of human individuals with power have claimed that they know for certain that that group over there is worthy of destruction because they are in league with personified evil. The only thing that has come out of such accusations is violence. Take a moment to contemplate that, dear friends. You are currently enjoying DJ Zed's classic track, Saludos Mundiales, which is in Spanish, Global Salutations. A remix live, improvised, digital asset audio loop performance of the Origin Audio Asset Pack. If you enjoy DJ Zed, you can support our musical endeavors by heading on over to soundcloud.com/Mr. Zeppo. as we round out this track, kind of in the middle, just fade it on out so we don't give it all away. Why am I talking about this? Why is this today's episode subject matter? Plain and simple, friends, because we just had yet another incident of this ridiculousness. And this has been around forever now. We just had the Grammys, right? And how many times have you seen conspiracy theory content say, oh, this thing, or the Olympics, or that opening ceremony, or this thing, or this issue of the Grammys, or this movie, or this performance at the Academy Awards, it's clearly got blah, 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 satanic symbols and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, cool. Maybe it does. I mean, obviously, I saw at least a portion of the number that, the performance that everyone's freaking out about. And yeah, yes, they were all wearing red. And yes, one of them was, some of them had horns. And yes, blah, 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 blah. Somebody said in social media commentary, in response to someone who doesn't buy into the idea that there is a satanic ritual going on stage, the guy responded with, someone responded with, well, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it must be a duck. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah. But do we not have artistic freedom in this country? Do we not have religious freedom in this country? Because that's one of the greatest ironies, right? There's like how many 3,000 some odd deities that are worshipped in this world? But oh my gosh, American conservative Christians are dead certain that they know the only truth. And yet, friends, their tropes, the ideological constructs, their dogmatic claims, they're all recycled. They've been around for millennia. And it's been used by groups from every kind of religion around the world. I could be wrong, but I don't know that there's an organized religion that exists today that is free of these kinds of accusations against their, perceived enemies. Ultimately, friends, the violence that is committed doesn't solve anything, right? Go back through history. This is one of my most nuanced arguments that I try to make on this show, and that plenty of people get, but plenty of people refuse to wrap their brains around. Okay, I'm in danger. Someone's attacking me. I chop their head off. They're no longer attacking me. Great. My act of violence, theoretically speaking, and I'm not advocating violence, but that act of violence, theoretically speaking, ended the immediate threat. Cool. That's great. Now, could I have ended the immediate threat in non-violent ways? Probably. Are they potentially riskier? Yeah, sure. But those are sidebar questions. Did my act of violence, ending that current threat, solve the problem? Did it fix the issue that prompted that individual to attack me? No, it didn't. It just stopped that individual. Whether it's one-on-one violence or group versus group violence, I am convinced that this statement remains true. I mean, how many massive wars have we fought to end war? And yet, how much conflict is going on in the world? The list is longer than most people care to acknowledge or even think about militarized conflicts around the world. Everyone's fixated on Ukraine, but there's like 30 other wars going on. People have been, worried about World War III breaking out for a long time, but arguably, we have been in a decentralized World War III since the mid-'80s, because the whole world is racked with violent militarized conflict. Now, I'm not in denial that there's, people who want to commit violent actions in this world. Some of those people are doing it because they believe that God is on their side. Some of those people are doing it just because they know that they may gain something from it. But ultimately, all of the violence being committed is futile and meaningless. And its only result is the perpetuation of more violence. It's really seductive. It's a really seductive argument to say you and your group, your tribe, your party, your community are the only righteous ones and everyone else is evil. But that kind of thinking only generates conflict and has never, in my experience, solved a damned problem ever. We have to do better. We have to change. We have to understand that just pointing fingers and waging wars, whether ideological or physical, has never solved a problem that we face. In fact, it's only created more problems. So I throw down this challenge to everyone. Question this nonsense narrative. Yeah, there's a Church of Satan. Cool, let them be a Church of Satan. Right? I mean, why not? Every other church gets to do what they want. There's supposed to be religious freedom in this country. Any organized religious group committing violence is failing their supposed spiritual journey, right? That's the irony of all organized religions. They preach the path to peace, but that path is riddled with violence. This is what we are being called to transcend. If there's a calling in this world, it isn't to strap up and be victorious in war. That only benefits those who profit on violence. If there's a calling in this world, it is to heal ourselves and heal each other and transcend all ideological constructs that seduce us into believing that violence is the only viable solution. That's the calling. That's the problem. That's the issue. That's where the real conflict is, in my humble opinion. I could be wrong, and plenty of people tell me every day that I am, and yet I don't see that community of people convinced that I'm insane solving any fucking problems, right? I don't see organized religion, although communities of faith do lots of good, right? I've never been blind to that. Charitable work is charitable work. But as I've told people to their face, you don't need an institution that is riddled with historical violence and corruption to this day in order to do charitable work. You can just do charitable work. You can help others because that's the right thing to do, not because God is telling you to do so, or else you're one of the bad guys. We can transcend the ideological limits, the political problems, and the imagined conflicts that we face if we stare down this nonsense of those people over there are not worthy. As soon as we start doing that to each other, we lower ourselves to the same place of the imagined evil we're fighting against. Even if what we're fighting against is a very real evil, right? There are big issues of deep corruption that are causing massive problems. But if we stoop to violence to address them, how are we any different? This is the critical issue, in my opinion, of our moment in time, our day right now, is to transcend any and all ideological constructs, whether they be religious, political, social, economic, that require us to take advantage of others, to profiteer on others. And yes, there is a technical difference between profit and profiteering. If you don't understand that, get a dictionary. That's what they're for. There's been so many people that have come back and be like, why are you mad because someone's making a profit? I'm like, no. I'm upset that some corporation is profiteering on people and not giving a flying hoot about the negative impacts. That's different than making a profit and being part of a, thriving economic community. Those are completely different things. And so I challenge everyone, dear friends. I say, let us band together to speak on this, to question it, to contemplate it, to meditate on this, to share our thoughts with others, and to stand up to those who insist on shouting from their rooftops that if we go and destroy those guys over there, then we will all get what we want, because that's a bunch of malarkey. We will just stain ourselves with more blood, and we're already drenched in it, yo. Yeah, it is true that we cannot blame current generations for our forefathers' sins, but we must take responsibility for those impacts. We must stand up and answer the call to facilitate the species plural possessive? Is it plural possessive? Well, we must step up and answer the call to facilitate our evolution as a species. There we go. That's a slightly clearer construction of that sentence. That's the calling. Our species needs to evolve intellectually, spiritually. That's how we transcend this malarkey, this madness that we're addicted to, in my humble opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But we won't find out if this idea is wrong if we don't try it. If we do not abdicate our addiction to this vilification of others and start seeing each other for what we truly are, which is one tribe. We are all genetically 99.9 to the ad nauseum decimal point of nines, genetically identical. And according to some spiritual wisdom teachings based on phenomenological experience, we are each other at the spiritual level. We can just let this go on. We can just keep blaming each other and accusing each other and invoking this cartoon personification of pure evil. But we will never solve the problems we create if we keep doing that. The last 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 years of human history should confirm that thesis. Because here we are, right? If violence fixed things, we would not be here in this crucible of us versus them madness. We would be, if violence positively solved problems, we would be a utopian society right now. We have committed so much violence on each other. But we're not. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to try something else. And that, friends, is what I've got to say today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's play a little bit of music and then get the F out of here. As always, friends, I humbly thank you for your support. and for your participation in this show. By all means, please do follow us on the social media. You can find all the links relative to the Zeppoverse projects over at solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. I'll be back tomorrow or the next day. This has been the Almost Daily ZenCast. Thank you for listening. And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily ZenCast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.